Hey folks, this is Kalani. The patch 9.1 PTR is in full swing, which means we can have a sneak peek at all of the awesome new additions coming to the game, including a whole new round of abilities or traits to unlock for our favourite Soulbinds. Each Soulbind gets 3 new passive abilities and a few extra conduit slots, and some of these new abilities are incredibly powerful, while others leave a lot to be desired. We have a lot to go through, so I'll be sure to provide you with timestamps to skip around to your heart's content. Now before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to point out that every single Soulbind edition is laid out in the exact same pattern. We have an additional potency conduit slot, followed by a choice of 2 passive abilities or traits, which then lead into 1 endurance conduit slot or 1 finesse conduit slot, and it ends up in another ultimate power. So there's no big toss-up between extra potency or endurance conduits, and there's no significant difference in the new layout areas when you compare Soulbinds. It's much more standardized across the board, which is kind of boring but also really nice when you're trying to compare everything together. That also means that everyone, no matter what Covenant or Soulbind you choose, will gain access to 1 additional potency conduit and then 1 additional finesse or endurance conduit depending on which path you take. With Night Fae being one of the most popular, or at least one of the most used Covenants right now, let's start with their Soulbinds and Naya. The new passive ability on the left is Cold Shot. When you critically strike, you gain 20% movement speed for 5 seconds. May only occur once every 10 seconds. If you play a class that crits quite often, this would translate to a 20% movement speed increase with about a 50% uptime, 5-second duration with a 10-second cooldown. That's a nice little speed boost for anyone who rolls with Naya, and will help you get to where you're going just that little bit faster. On the right side we have Survivor's Rally. When you fall below 50% health, you regain 20% of your health over 10 seconds and receive 5% additional healing from other spells and abilities. May only occur once every 60 seconds. This is going to be great in any situation where you foresee yourself taking a lot of damage. It could be useful as a mini healing cooldown in raids or dungeons, and it can increase your survivability in PvP, or it can just act as a self-heal while you're out in the world doing quests or whatever else. And then Naya's new ultimate trait at the bottom is Bonded Hearts. Gaining a stack of redirected anima from Grove Invigoration heals up to 5 nearby allies for 2% of their health. If any of the affected allies are of another Covenant, redirected anima's mastery and max health effects are increased by 50% for 5 seconds. This sounds kinda crazy when you realize just how often you gain stacks of redirected anima. It's a lot of free heals for your group, and you can even get a souped up bonus for your own mastery buff to go crazy on your damage. The only downside here might be the part where targets have to be a Covenant that isn't Night Fae, because let's be honest, half of your raid group is probably Night Fae, which reduces your chances of getting that extra buff. Moving on to Dreamweaver, the new power on the left is Cunning Dreams. Entering Soul Shape slows enemies near your starting point by 50% for 6 seconds. Having an extra on-demand slow is always nice, but having to burn Soul Shape to activate it isn't necessarily ideal. Could be very useful in PvP though. On the right we have Waking Dreams. When you take damage below 80% health, you gain a shield for 30% of the damage amount, lasting for 3 seconds. I was curious about this one and wondered whether or not the shield has a cooldown, and it doesn't as of right now. Any damage you take while you are below 80% health will provide you with a shield, which is kind of like a constant 30% damage reduction, providing you are taking constant damage. The shield only lasts for 3 seconds, so if you don't get hit during those 3 seconds, the shield is wasted, but I imagine this is going to be incredibly powerful for tanks who take constant damage. It's kind of in the job description, or on boss fights that deal constant damage to your entire raid. I think this might be one trait to keep an eye on throughout the PTR cycle. And then the new ultimate trait for Dreamweaver is Dream Delver. Dealing damage or healing a target grants you 1% increased damage or healing to that target for 4 seconds, up to 3%. A little boring, it's just a passive damage increase, but this will net you up to 3% extra damage or healing to specific targets, which will definitely be useful on longer encounters like boss fights in raid or in dungeons. And then the last Soulbind for the Night Fae is Korayn. The first power on the left is Vorkai Ambush. After interrupting or disorienting an enemy, they deal 5% less damage for 5 seconds. This could end up being very good for anyone with an AoE disorient or on high damage targets that also get interrupted a lot. On the right we have Hunt's Exhilaration. When damaging an enemy or healing an ally within 8 yards, you gain 3% leech for 5 seconds. So as long as you are close to what you're targeting, you get some free leech. I guess that's going to be good for anyone who scales well with leech and can proc this effect quite often. And then down at the bottom we have Wild Hunt Stratagem. When your damage or healing is enhanced by Wild Hunt tactics, gain Wild Hunt Stratagem for 1 minute. The next time you damage an enemy who is below 35% health or heal an ally who is above 75% health, Wild Hunt Stratagem is activated to increase your damage and healing to such targets by 5% for 10 seconds. If you've forgotten, you proc Wild Hunt targets by damaging an enemy above 75% health or healing an ally below 35% health, so you will gain benefits at varying health percentages for both allies and enemies, which is probably going to be annoying to keep track of, but this could end up being incredibly useful for dungeons, especially where you have a chance to proc both of these buffs back to back. Let's take a look at the new Kyrian Soulbind traits next, starting with Pelagos. The new ability on the left is Better Together. During combat, moving within 3 yards of a party or raid member inspires both of you, increasing mastery by 40 for 1 minute. Players may only be affected by one such effect. A bit of free mastery never hurt anyone, especially if you're stacked up with each other anyway. On the right we have Path of the Devoted. After recovering from a loss of control effect, you take 15% reduced damage and your movement speed cannot be reduced below 90% for 6 seconds. May only occur once per 30 seconds. This sounds perfect for PvP. Reduced damage after stuns or CCs and then an anti-slow effect right on top. And then at the bottom we have Newfound Resolve. At any moment during combat there is a low chance your doubt will manifest for 10 seconds. Directly facing your doubt will overcome it, granting 12% primary stat and stamina for 15 seconds. This sounds like a crazy huge buff, but it's going to depend on the proc rate and how annoying facing your doubt is going to be. From the quick testing we did, a little Shah looking doubt creature farts out in a random direction, and just turning your character to face it will make it disappear and then you get the buff. Seems quite easy to me, so this one could end up being super powerful as well. Moving on to Kleia, her first new ability is Spear of the Archon. Movement speed increased by 6% while out of combat, gain 3% crit strike chance for 10 seconds after damaging an enemy above 90% health. Nothing too exciting, but probably quite useful for raid bosses with lots of adds or dungeons in general. On the right we have Hope Springs Eternal. Your Vial of Serenity reduces damage taken by 10% for 8 seconds, and its effects are also granted to your lowest health ally. That gives you the ability to help out your group with some extra healing, provide a damage reduction buff, potentially remove some debuffs, and maybe even gives them some other bonuses depending on what other traits you picked up further up the tree. That's super cool for anyone wanting to provide extra support. And then her last trait is called Light the Path. Your Valiant Strikes grant 0.25% crit strike chance per stack, and when your Valiant Strike heals an ally, you each gain 5% crit chance for 12 seconds. Extra crit is never a bad thing, and I think this last point will give Kleia some interesting niche uses while also providing a decent damage boost. For Mikanikos, the new ability on the left is called Soul Glow Spectrometer. Damaging or healing a target analyzes its merit over 15 seconds, increasing your damage or healing to it by 1%, increasing by an additional 1% every 3 seconds. Cannot start a new analysis until the previous one has finished. With 15 seconds on the clock and you gain 1% per 3 seconds, that's a total of 6% damage over the entire effect. When you average that out, it will provide close to a 3% bonus overall, which is the same as the other Night Fae power from earlier, except this one seems to be single target only. That restriction alone makes this kind of bad, especially for healers, which is a shame really. On the other side, we have reactive retrofitting. After taking physical or magic damage, gain a shield that absorbs damage equal to 8% of your max health for 10 seconds. Each incoming damage type may trigger this effect once per 30 seconds. This seems kinda crazy for tanks. 8% max health shield for 10 seconds every 30 seconds, and the cooldown is separate for magic damage and physical damage. On any fight where you have plenty of both types of damage, I imagine this power will provide significant amounts of healing. And the last point is Effusive Anima Accelerator. Your Covenant signature ability releases a blast of overcharged anima at your target's location, dealing arcane damage split evenly between all targets over 8 seconds. It also reduces the cooldown of your signature ability depending on how many targets you hit. The cooldown reduction here is actually based upon the class you are playing. I'll show you some quick examples on screen. Giving every Kyrian player an additional on-demand burst AoE ability, plus a large cooldown reduction effect on that very same ability to give you more access to it, that's going to be insanely strong for certain classes. Alright, let's move on and check out the Necrolords next, starting with Marileth. On the left we have Viscous Trail. When struck by a snare, you drop a puddle that lasts for 10 seconds. Enemies that step in the puddle are slowed by 70% for 5 seconds, may only occur once every 60 seconds. This one is hilarious in my opinion. Can you imagine getting snared and just pooping out a little puddle like, ha, you wanna slow me? Hope we can dodge sludge puddles? This one's gonna be great. On the right we have Undulating Maneuvers. While above 80% health, 5% of damage taken is delayed and spread out over 5 seconds. That's literally a Brewmaster Monk's stagger, but given to anyone who wants to roll with the Necrolords. That's kinda broken when you think about how many tanks will want to use this single ability. And then the last ability is Kevin's Oozling. Your Covenant signature ability summons Kevin's Oozling to fight alongside you for 8 seconds. His attacks cause your enemies to take 2% additional damage from you, and he periodically grants your allies an absorb shield. That's a nice little double whammy on the extra damage and extra support for your group. Moving on to Emeni's new powers, we have Soul Slow. After standing still for 5 seconds, the next time you move, you and nearby allies gain 20% increased movement speed for 10 seconds. That's like a mini stampeding roar every 5 seconds you can stand still. There's some great potential there, and I love how some of these newer powers could have some awesome niche case uses. Then we also have Resilient Stitching. While above 90% health, you gain a shield that absorbs magic damage for 1 minute. This effect may only occur once every 1 minute. A free magic damage shield is going to be awesome on any fight with lots of magic damage, I guess. And the final trait here is Pustule Eruption. What a lovely name. Fleshcraft covers you in 3 pustules per 1 second you channel. Taking damage or being healed pops a pustule, dealing nature damage to nearby enemies and healing nearby allies. That's pretty gross, but it sounds very useful. It also turns the Necrolord's signature ability, which is primarily a defensive ability, into an offensive ability at the same time, with some strong AoE potential. And then we have Bonesmith Heirmir. On the left we have Carver's Eye. Damaging an enemy above 90% health grants you mastery for 5 seconds, up to 5 stacks. You cannot gain this benefit from the same target for 10 seconds. So you need multiple targets to get the maximum benefit, which means if you ever have 5 targets in a dungeon pull, for example, you start off with a massive mastery buff for 5 seconds. That's going to be great for any class with big bursty cooldowns. On the right we have Waking Bone Breastplate. When 3 or more enemies are nearby, your max health is increased by 5%, and this effect lingers for 5 seconds. 5% max health isn't all too interesting, but I guess the tanks out there could make some good use out of this one. And the last one on the list for Necrolord's Mnemonic Equipment. When you damage an enemy that's below 35% health, 3% of the damage done is repeated over 5 seconds. Healing an ally grants them the ability to have their damage repeat this same way at 30% effectiveness for 5 seconds, with a limit of 2 targets. This one is very interesting. It essentially provides you with a damage boost while in execute range of any monster, and it allows you to pass on a smaller damage boost to your allies if you can heal them. For any hybrid spec that plays Necrolord, this is going to be a very interesting choice indeed. And last but not least, we have the Venthyr. The first ability on the left here is Sinful Preservation. Health potions and health stones grant you an absorb shield equal to 50% of the amount healed. That's going to be very useful as an overall healing cooldown in raids specifically. I can already hear my raid leader shouting for everyone to use a health stone. On the right we have nimble steps. Enemies within 8 yards are slowed by 10%. If you fall below 35% health, enemies within 8 yards are rooted for 4 seconds. This can only occur once every 60 seconds. Another trait that screams PvP, though I guess this one will be useful for getting away from anything dangerous when you're on low health. And then Nadjia's final trait is Fatal Flaw. When the haste effect of Euphoria ends, you gain 10 seconds of either 20% increased crit strike chance or versatility, whichever you currently have more of. So 20% haste followed up by 20% crit or verse. That's going to be an incredible amount of burst after that ability activates for anyone who runs with the Venthyr. Theotar's first new ability is It's Always Tea Time, because of course it is. When Soothing Shade activates, Tubbins and Gubbins each offer you a cup of tea, healing you every 1 second and reducing damage taken by 5% while standing in the shaded area. Because of course that's what this ability does. A bit of extra healing and damage reduction is going to be nice for anyone who wants to stay shady with their cups of tea. On the right we have Life is but an appetizer. While you are well fed, gain 60 speed and 60 avoidance. If you ever wanted some more tertiary stats for doing absolutely nothing, look no further. Probably not the best trait on the table, but at least the names can't be beat. And then Theotar's last ability is Party Favors. Once per day you can speak with Theotar in Sinfall to obtain the Mad Duke's Tea, which increases your primary stat by 3%, your haste by 3%, your crit by 3%, or your versatility by 3% for 1 hour. I give this one top points for flavour, but choosing which hour of the day to use your precious tea buff is going to be an absolute nightmare. I wonder if you can still use this tea and then swap to a different Soulbind. That's something to keep an eye on as the PTR progresses. And then the last Soulbind on this long list is Draven. His left ability is Regenerative Stone Skin. Any overhealing done to you will heal for an additional 15% of the overhealing amount over 6 seconds. Making use of overhealing is always great because then it doesn't go to waste. Probably only super useful for tanks though, I would guess. And on the right we have Intimidation Tactics. While below 50% health, Door of Shadows cools down 50% faster. That could be quite useful in certain situations, though I doubt you would ever want to stay below 50% health just to get your teleport back faster. And then the last trait is Battlefield Presence. Each nearby enemy trembles at your presence, increasing your damage and healing done by 1% and reducing damage taken by 1% up to a maximum of 3 enemies. 3% damage done and 3% reduced damage taken, not too bad. Probably not enough to pick up Draven just by itself, but it's a nice bonus if you already run with Draven as your favourite Soulbind. And that's all of the new Soulbind powers and traits that are coming in patch 9.1. I guess if anyone was hoping that less power would be tied to your Covenant choice, well, that's certainly not the case for this upcoming patch. Some of these abilities could tip the scales with which Covenants come out on top for certain specs, and I can see some of them being used to cheese mechanics in raids or dungeons. I honestly can't wait to see what kind of wacky strategies players will come up with, but that's it for this video. Do you think any of these powers really stick out as powerful and must-have traits, and which ones do you think are still too boring or too weak overall, and which ones do you think will get nerfed before this patch goes live? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who has subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.